Hi, this is Mama Rose, and we just got done with a wonderful carnivore dinner. I was so excited to cook carnivore for somebody tonight, so we invited William over, who's 18, and he's a carnivore. And so anyway, I wanted to have him over so we could see what an 18-year-old on carnivore looks like, and give you an encouragement and see why an 18-year-old would go carnivore. So anyway, this is William. Okay, so I met William at church. His brother plays the bass, and his brother's in-laws kept telling me, "Oh, I'm gonna love the Moody's. You know, they're carnivore." So of course, when they came to church one day, I introduced myself, and so here we are. So we're William goes to Embry-Riddle.
Yep, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, the Prescott campus here.
Okay. So how long have you been carnivore?
So I started carnivore in the middle of my senior football season, so September of 2018. So just over a year and a couple months now.
Okay. Now your parents were doing it.
Yes, yeah. So my mom started carnivore, and she was doing it for about a month and a half, and then my father started carnivore, and that's really when I started to consider like actually going carnivore. Before that, we had been on keto for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then you were telling me earlier that you got to, which is most people that go carnivore are keto first or paleo.
Yeah.
And then they find that, you know, they feel good and everything is great, and maybe they've lost weight, but they just feel like there's just something missing. And then, I don't know, was it like with you, you'd start watching YouTube videos or hearing people talk about carnivore that had been keto? And
well, yeah.
Interested in
so, so originally, the way we got into low carb was we'd always been on a health journey, especially my mother, and you know we did the whole grain sourdough bread, making our own bread and making our own things. But then we found keto, and my mom found keto, and we all started it as a family, and I gained about 15 pounds of muscle on that, but then I kind of hit a plateau, and I wasn't quite satisfied with what I had already reached, and so when my mother really kind of started talking about carnivore, and she was doing a lot of research, we started eating more meat, and it was kind of a natural progression from that low carb keto to carnivore. And so when I first went on it, you know, I gained 5 pounds. I kind of got out of that rut of not getting gains in the weight room, and then not being able to gain any more muscle. So really, you know, that's how I got on keto, is through my mom and then my dad. And kind of their journey towards it.
Now, were they doing it for weight or health at all?
Yeah, so my mom is always a very...
Go ahead. Keep going.
My mom's always been a very healthy person, and so it was for health overall, but my dad is also a type 1 diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always trying to look for ways to lower the amount of insulin he needs, and so control sugars naturally. And keto helped to do that a little, and my dad lost, I think, about 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and so it was a little bit of weight loss, but really just overall, you want to be as healthy as you can. Health is a great asset for anyone, and so
because I've met your parents, and they're not obese by a long shot.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks people do keto or whatever to lose a bunch of weight, and that's not always the case.
That was just a very happy side effect.
Yeah, exactly. Now for us, we lost a grip of weight. I mean, I was like 165, and I'm only 5'2" and a half. So now I got weighed the other day, and I'm 112.9. I don't think I've been 112 since before I was 12. So it was kind of exciting. Did you notice from keto to carnivore that your body composition changed? Did that?
Yeah, so when I was on keto, kind of transitioning to carnivore, it wasn't a very hard transition. A lot of people think that getting onto carnivore, is the carnivore flu or whatever. I was already low carb, so it wasn't a very hard transition. So when I transitioned to carnivore, I noticed that overall I was just stronger. I had more energy. Whether that was, doing schoolwork and getting through the day or in the gym. Overall, I just had more energy, mental clarity, and I just felt better. I just feel so much better on a pure carnivore diet. So.
That's awesome. That's because usually you don't think of 18-year-olds, and people will say, that you shouldn't eat weird different ways. That you should eat the food pyramid. Especially if you're growing. A strong body. You need Wonder Bread and lots of milk and that kind of stuff. But that is so opposite of what really is the truth.
Yeah, and I actually get a lot of pushback. Like on campus, I have a lot of friends that clearly aren't carnivore. I don't think I've actually met anyone else who has been carnivore, but they're all just oh, that's crazy, and so there's quite a bit of pushback about how I eat, and so it's quite interesting.
Well, I think anybody that's carnivore will tell you everybody gets a lot of pushback, and I was so excited to meet your family because they're the first ones that I knew of that were carnivore. So it's like, and your parents live in Phoenix.
Tucson.
Oh, they're in Tucson.
Yeah, they're down
really
in Tucson,
far away. Oh, wow. So when I heard they were going to be at church, I was like, wow, there's a guy with them that looks like Collier, that's your brother, and I thought, that's got to be them, so I ran over. So I'm excited for them to move up because there's a little camaraderie there, because anywhere you go, people look at your we've lost friends over this, because we're eating carnivore. So, and they think you're going to die from the cholesterol and all that.
Yeah.
And you were telling me earlier that you'd done some research on that, and the whole fallacy that eating a lot of meat, because I'll get that a lot. Well, isn't there cholesterol in meat? So how can you eat that? You're going to end up with clogged arteries.
Yeah,
so
cholesterol isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself, right? So the basic idea is if you have high LDL and low HDL cholesterol, then that's bad for you. However, those specific levels, from what I've found, are not as important to what you're just physically eating and what you'll physically eat, whether that be keto or carnivore. That will change as you get healthier overall. I'm not sure how they interact when you go on a carnivore, but when you have a high carb diet, you eat those carbs and they convert to glucose in the bloodstream, and that causes a lot of inflammation. And when you have inflammation in your arteries, then your body will naturally start to cover that inflammation with cholesterol and triglycerides because they're naturally anti-inflammatory, and so you get plaques from your body trying to repair itself. And so really what people are doing when they're trying to lower cholesterol with whatever medication that you're trying to take to lower that is you're treating the symptom and you're not treating the root cause. The root cause is the crap diet that you're eating, and is not the fat that you have there in your blood. So.
It's so opposite of what you're 18, so you haven't really grown up with it. But from us, fed that fat is bad. Fat is bad.
Yeah.
But fat is not bad. Fat is really good for you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And we need fat. I mean, our brain needs the fat, and so by taking that away, it's really, we end up with a society that most people are type 2 diabetics. Now your dad's a type 1 diabetic, so that's something that you're born with.
Well, born with, or usually it can be caused by a virus. So he got chicken pox when he was 18, I believe, and that basically shocked his system, and so he doesn't produce insulin anymore.
Wow,
so,
that's not a real common thing, is it? That to do that.
I'm not sure how common it is, but yeah, that, and so he's lived with that for it's about 30 years now, and so yeah.
So now you are in the dorm. You live in the dorm, right?
Yeah, I live on campus at a dorm.
On campus.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tell me what a typical day of eating is for you.
Yeah, so I normally don't eat breakfast. I do intermittent fasting. I don't really eat before noon. It just kind of depends on the flow of my day. But specific food wise, a majority of what I eat is ground beef.
Okay.
Because that's really the easiest thing to cook, right? You just put a bunch of ground beef in a pot and let it sizzle, and you mix it and stir it and whatnot. And but I have a little hot plate with like a pot hot plate, and I just cook ground beef in that. I also cook burger patties in that, and when I go home, we cook a bunch of steaks, and then I bring it back up, and so I'm still enjoying some nice New York strip steaks from my freezer. But yeah, majority of the time it's just ground beef.
Now, do you cook those ahead of time and then freeze them once they're cooked, or do you
the ground beef?
The steaks?
Yeah. So we grill them and then freeze them, and then I bring them back up from home, and then just keep them in my freezer, and then thaw them like the day before, and then I'll just put them in the fridge and eat them whenever I eat them.
That's great.
But normally I only eat once or twice a day in the afternoon. So I fast for about 16 to 18 hours normally. And it's just easy. It's very easy not having to worry about eating so much. There's also a dining facility on campus that has some pretty good omelets. I get bacon, sausage, and ham, just in 3 eggs, and so that's good. Hard-boiled eggs are also a good thing. It's really easy to boil those in the little pot I have. And so and my roommates enjoy the smell of the ground beef and whatnot. So, but overall in a day, I wait until the afternoon to eat, and then I have either a bowl of ground beef or a steak or both, depending on how hungry I am. Just eat to satiety, and then I wait for the next day and just do that again.
Because I just fed you, and I've fed 18-year-olds before, and that eat twice as much as you.
Yeah.
So I thought she'd have a bigger appetite. But, it's good. It's okay because, so many things revolve around food.
Yeah,
And how much time do we waste, and how much thinking do we waste?
Exactly.
Revolving around food. And you were telling me that a lot of your classmates are always thinking about, oh, I'm hungry, I missed breakfast.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's quite funny, actually. I'll say, oh, yeah, I haven't eaten since yesterday. It'll be 10 o'clock in the morning. And they're like, dude, I didn't eat, breakfast this morning. I am so hungry. And I'll be fine. And it's quite entertaining. But it's also kind of revealing how when you eat a high-carb diet, you're very tied to constantly eating. And when you're constantly eating, then you just keep putting fuel into your body that if you don't use it, then it will turn you to fat. And so, yeah.
Well, I learned recently that I think our body, as far as glucose goes, it can only store it's 2,000 calories or something. It's not a lot. So once you hit a certain level, the rest is going to be stored as fat, and that every time you eat something, insulin is produced.
Yeah.
And so you get that insulin response. And so when you're eating carnivore, there is going to be some insulin response, but not like when you're eating all these carbs. And so the more you eat, and I had heard the analogy, it's like putting pine needles on a fire, or twigs on a fire when you're eating.
Yeah, carbs are more like kindling. They burn very fast, and so you need to keep refueling your body with them. So as opposed to fat, which and protein, when you eat that, is more satiety. You're fuller, quicker, and longer.
And that's because we're in ketosis. So if you're eating that way, you're in ketosis. So we've switched our body. Are eating from carnivore, from being fat burners to being sugar burners to being fat burners. I didn't realize it was that bad here. There we go. So we are fat burners instead of sugar burners, and so our bodies run a lot more efficiently. And we come from the mountains, and so we burn a lot of fires. And the best wood is like manzanita. It's hardwood, and it is like, you know, you can burn that forever. And oak is really great. But if you're gonna burn a lot of wood, if you're using pine or any of those soft woods, you're gonna burn a lot of wood. So it's kind of like our bodies, you know, it runs much more efficiently on ketones, and it feeds the brain better.
Yeah.
And our body needs fat. So I had another question I was going to ask you. You were telling me the bacon story at school because they want you to eat the carbohydrates. So you're piling the bacon.
Yeah. So at the dining facility, Earhart's, we actually call it Air Sharts a lot of times because it makes you poop a lot if you eat the carbs. But yeah, so I went in there for breakfast, and normally for breakfast I just get the 3-egg omelet and I'm out of there because I don't like their ham or sausage really. But they eat bacon. I love bacon. So
Bacon.
yeah, exactly. It's the candy of the meat world. And so I go up there and I've got those styrofoam to-go boxes and I start shoveling, you know, bacon in my box, and they get all angry at me. It's like, oh, you gotta leave some. Like, well, this is all I eat. And it's like, oh, there are other options, and so, but yeah, they just got angry at me for not having, you know, the hash browns as well as the bacon, and so I think it's just so rare that people just aren't used to it. And I kept telling her, you know, that's the only thing I eat. I eventually just took all the bacon and went and got an omelet and got out of there. But before they could take it away.
Bacon,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So now actually what you can do is you get your own Tupperware and you bring it in your backpack. So you go in there and, you know, you fill up a plate, but then you just put it in the Tupperware and then you go for seconds.
Okay.
And then you put it in the Tupperware.
So you
and
figured out.
yeah, so you gotta kind of sneak around,
I know, right?
sneak around that. So it's fun.
When you know about food and what it does, and you see all the junk that they feed everybody. Now you're going in your RTC, and you're going to go in the military.
I'm a freshman in Army ROTC. Yeah.
So as far as your body and your, we were talking earlier with football.
Yeah, I played football for 4 years in high school and then ran track for 3.
And so did you notice a big difference when you went from keto to carnivore, or even keto, with your endurance and those kind of things?
Yeah, so going into keto, I gained about 15 pounds of muscle. My junior year of football, I was about 150 ish, and then by the
5'8", you said 5'8"?
Yeah, I'm 5'8". Yeah, so I was about 150. So I was kind of skinny. Still had some good definition, but I was kind of skinny. So I put about 15 pounds on. So I was 165.
Were you working out when you were doing that?
Yeah. So for football, we lifted 3 times a week during the off season. Then during season, you know, we'd practice, and during summers we'd practice, and so that's a lot of cardio, and they did a lot of push-ups. And but then during track, there was a lot of sprinting and leg work and core work. So I was constantly working out and whatnot during this entire period. So on keto originally, I gained about 15 pounds, but then I hit kind of a plateau. And on carnivore, I gained another 5-10 pounds. And my senior year of football, I capped off at about 175. And then track, I dropped down just a little to about 172. And that's about where I am right now. But, you know, at my strongest, which was on carnivore, I benched 205, squatted 315, deadlifted 375 on a barbell, and then power clean 235.
I don't know anything you just said. Mark does, because he lifted weights, but I take it that's pretty good. I mean, I can't even lift. I'm so weak. I need to work out. Yeah, that's pretty good.
They're good weights. But yeah, I get a lot stronger on keto and carnivore. I saw a marked difference between when I was on when I was on like a standard American diet, healthy standard American diet, healthy quote unquote, as opposed to keto and carnivore. So
now this channel that I'm going to put this on primarily, I'll do for both. I have just my my keto culture one, but I have this new one. It's called the Christian Carnivore. And so Mark threw a little study on there a couple of weeks ago on that, and when I met you at church and we started talking, you'd said you did a lot of research on that, from a biblical standpoint. What does it mean? What does it mean to eat carnivore? So do you have anything to say about that?
So a lot of people, from a Christian perspective, obviously, atheists won't take this for anything that it is. But from a Christian perspective, a lot of people look at the Garden of Eden, and all they had was fruits and vegetables. However, that was a perfect world, and that world was without death and without sin. And so without death, you cannot eat carnivore.
He whispers it. You gotta
can't
kill to eat carnivore.
you do have to kill. But we can get into whether vegetarianism and veganism actually kills more animals than carnivore. But in that perspective, that was a world without sin and death. We are in a world with sin and death now. And following the flood, humans were permitted to eat animals and the flesh of animals. So it's a perfectly biblical perspective, or perfectly biblically based to eat meat. And the science clearly shows, and the experience of a lot of people clearly shows that eating only meat is the healthiest for you. And from a biblical and Christian perspective, our bodies are temples of God. And so if they're temples of God and we're supposed to be good stewards of them, then we need to take the best care of them as we can. And so if we go on a carnivore diet and you lose weight, you get healthier, you get off medications, it has all of these great benefits, then really I think that's part of our worship to God. Because if you're taking care of your body, then that means you are stewarding something that God has given you. And so really when I exercise and when I devote to eat carnivore, because I believe it's the best way to eat, it's really part of my personal worship. And so, all these people like, oh, you need to eat vegetables and the Garden of Eden, it's a
Well, I
pastime.
think what's frustrating for us, especially our age, I'm 64, Mark is 66, and, we, most people our age are decrepit. They've got diabetes, they've got high blood pressure, they're on statins, they're on blood thinners, they're way overweight. I go into the jail once a month to do a Bible study, and the girls that are in there, I look around the room, and these are young girls. Now, sometimes we'll get old lady here and there, but for the most part, they're young girls. They're your age. They're 21, they're 25, and they're all overweight. Now, granted, there's a lot of alcohol, I'm sure, involved in that. But you go to the store and there's so many overweight people, and I think what spurred us on for the health journey that we were on is just exactly what you said, in that God wants to use us here to do a job. If we're all falling apart and decrepit, how are we going to do it? So
exactly.
We want to be the best that we can be, and we're not obsessing over it. In fact, we think less about it. I was a foodie. And you could tell by the meal here that I still had a bit of foodie in me. But
that's quite the spread. It's pretty good. It's delicious.
I did take pictures. But I don't do that every day. We'll have 2 or 3, Mark will eat one thing at a time. He's always been there, one thing at a time. But I have to have a vegetable and a salad and then the meat.
Put it all together.
And then I'll have a little meat on the side is what I used to do. But now with the meat, we'll have bacon and a hamburger and a steak, or fish and scallops and shrimp and a steak, and we'll mix 2 or 3 different proteins together, and that's what we'll have for a meal. But it's not like most of the time we only eat once a day.
Oh yeah.
So, Mark, can you shut that off? It went blue. We're making colloidal silver over here, and it went blue. So unplug the back of it. Anyway, it went blue. We'll send you home with some colloidal silver too. So back to the, how our bodies were. When I was learning about, Mark was going over the Bible stuff and everything, and I was really giving it a lot of thought. Isn't that just like God? He made us so that we could be sugar burners and fat burners. And from what I've understood, it's not that way in the animal kingdom. Cats don't stop eating meat and they don't eat vegetables. And the animals in the wild, I mean, when you were kind of looking at any of that, did you run across some of that where no animal eats both?
Well, there are some omnivores, but like when we look at carnivores and when we look at like cows are they eat grass, but their digestive tract is extremely different from ours, and so we're clearly not vegan. But God did create us to be able to digest both meat products, animal products, and plant food. However, the way I look at it is that meat is the food that you should eat. That is food. However, you can eat vegetables in a survival situation. If you don't have meat and you need food, absolutely need food, then you can eat that, and God gave us that ability.
And I think that's just awesome.
Exactly.
My cousin's daughter started eating vegetarian when she was a teenager, and she can't have children, and
it messes your body up.
And her body will not make vitamin B at all. She can't, there's no vitamin B in her body. She has to take mega doses of it. And I was talking to her about, eating meat, and of course she says, well, yeah, she tried that. She ate a little bit of it. But the doctor told her, I think it was like 1 ounce, there's enough vitamin B in 1 ounce of meat to last you for 3 months. It was some ridiculously long period of time that it's so packed with it. And from what I understand about vegetarian and veganism, and I was a health food person, grinding my wheat and making my bread and, vegetable lasagna and grew my vegetables and all that stuff. That in order to make a complete protein, you have, all the amino acids are needed. You have to add to it. So there is no one vegetable, even if you're eating legumes, you're not going to get all of what you need nutritionally from any of those things. But one small piece of meat will give it all to
protein,
you.
That's all the amino acids that you need.
Exactly. So it is really the perfect food.
It is.
And it's much easier on the body than eating all the vegetables. And we were brought up in this world thinking the opposite. Meat's hard to digest.
A lot of people look at meat and it's just gonna stay in your body and rot, and that's really not the case. Meat is actually so much higher. It has such a higher bioavailability. That means we can absorb it so much easier, and we can absorb so many of the nutrients so much more readily than plants. And so when you eat a plant, spinach has a lot of iron. Yeah, it does, but you can't access all of that iron. You can only access a minute amount of that iron. And so basically what you're giving yourself is a bunch of carbs and fiber and pesticides, because 95% of the pesticides that we ingest are, from plants, naturally produced from the plants, not sprayed on. And so, so what you're eating there is the sugar, the fiber, which messes up your gut health, and pesticides. And so when you eat meat, you get all of these wonderful nutrients, you get protein in order to build muscle, and you get fat in order to fuel yourself. And so really, it's the perfect package. You get fuel, structure, and nutrition. So,
well, there's a lot of anti-nutrients in those vegetables too. They're famous for having, well, like spinach even. You mentioned spinach. Well, I learned a long time ago that it binds the calcium. So it really, like you said with the iron, you're not really getting it. And so, and I thought about different grasses and different vegetables. God said He put all these things there for us, the herbs. Well, being an herbalist, I'm studying to be an herbalist, or was. Those things are there medicinally. There's so many medicinal benefits
there are.
to them. And I found, and I do essential oils too. So I noticed that when I cleaned up my diet and was feeling the way I feel now, the oils work good for me. I mean, I don't have to take a pill for a headache anymore. I just sniff some peppermint oil. If I'm sore, I use another oil. I mean, they work so much better than when I was eating all those vegetables. Not to mention all the work that's involved in making cauliflower pizza and having broccoli and making sure the vegetables don't spoil. It's just so much easier to do, and it's cheaper. And that's another thing. People will say, I don't know about your roommates or the people that you go to school with, if they're buying their food and stuff, but I bet you spend a lot less on food than they do.
Yeah. So as a poor college student, I have an excellent perspective on this. So I actually usually per month on food, maybe $50.
You're kidding me.
Like I just get ground beef, and I have just a bunch of Redmond real salt. I actually asked for Redmond real salt for Christmas, and so I got a bunch of packages of that in my cabinet. And so, but yeah, I barely spend any money on food, and it's a great thing because I don't have a lot of money. A lot of people are like, oh, it's so expensive. Meat is so expensive, but when they're thinking of that, they're also thinking, oh, I've got to buy the broccoli on the side with the butter, and then I've got to get the bread and maybe some garlic. I don't know. I don't really eat that anymore.
Cookies, pies, cakes,
Yeah,
and candy will go
exactly.
along with it too.
And so they have all these fillers to just have on the side, as opposed to just having the meat, which can provide all your nutritional needs. And so I only get the meat, and it might be more expensive than that cereal you're getting, but I eat less of it, and I'm not also eating all this other crud, and I'm also only eating once or twice a day. And so I really don't spend that much money. I get really I go to Fry's in order to get big, like 5-pound chubs of meat. They're about $10 when they're on sale. So I just buy 2 of those, and those will last me a couple weeks. And
so you're not doing like grass fed, that kind of stuff.
So I do when I can, but honestly, on a carnivore diet, it is so much better just to eat meat than vegetables than to specifically always be looking for grass-fed. Grass-fed food or grass-fed beef and meat is better, yes. But it's not an extraordinarily large amount
Yeah,
better,
they haven't really.
And so I don't necessarily look for that. I look for like nitrates and like things to keep the meat, and that might be toxic in there, but the ground beef I get don't.
Of course, obviously, if you're getting bacon from the cafeteria or the restaurant at school, it's probably
that'll have it, but I don't have that all that often. That's more, if I see it, then yeah, sure, but that only happens about once a month maybe.
Now I had heard a lot about like the nightshade vegetables and stuff.
Mhm.
That, before we started doing carnivore,
Yeah.
we would eat a lot of that stuff. And of course, I was having super hot flashes and just physical things going on and couldn't really quite figure it out. So as an elimination diet, it's a really great thing.
Yeah.
I tell people, try it. We tried it for a week, and the 7th day we weren't hungry at all, so we didn't eat at all. I mean, we didn't even want to eat. And so we did it for 8 days. And then I kind of backed off a little bit. And Mark continued because he always liked meat. He would eat meat and I would eat the vegetables. It was just,
Oh, yeah.
So I thought, you know what, I'm Italian. I come from, because that was another thing that got us really upset watching all these people talk about carnivore, because they got into, your Neanderthal and, evolution, you evolved to this and, look at your ancestry. So, if we strictly did that, he comes from cold weather, Scotland, Ireland, those places like that. And, my family's all from Italy where it's warmer. They have lemon trees, a lot of fruit trees.
Yeah.
So I tended more toward that. Did you have a tendency toward those things?
Yeah, so I've always been raised on, we're gonna have meat all the time. We had bratwursts and steaks and we'd have ground beef and elk, if we killed an elk, and we actually raised our own pigs, raised our own lambs.
Wow.
We had our own chickens, and so we get our own eggs, and so we get our own eggs. We wouldn't really process the chickens; we just buy the chicken, but we'd have our own pork. The bacon is amazing, and then we'd have our own lamb, and so we've always had a bunch of meat, and so it was natural for us to like meat.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved meat, and my dad's great at grilling, so that's a plus. So
that's great. So, well, there's a lot. Anything. I had a list of questions and I didn't grab it with me. So, but it's just really interesting to see somebody young doing it that didn't do it because they were obese.
Mhm.
But there's so many people out there that are your age that are obese.
Oh yeah,
and
it's quite sad. I see it on campus all the time, and it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's terrible, and they don't feel good, and they don't think good about themselves, and it's an epidemic. It really is, and I just hoping more people will get interested. If anybody noticed your like your bodybuilding and you're doing things that build up your muscles, does anybody ever comment and ask you, what are you doing? You seem to be fit and you're,
Well, I'm pretty fit. I like to think that I'm pretty fit, but I haven't had too many questions about it. Some people ask, oh, I'm trying to put on weight, and I'll always suggest, the best thing to put on weight is weightlifting, obviously, squats, deadlifts, bench, using weights, but then just eating as much meat as you can.